Welcome back, podcast friends. And I know I say this a lot, but this couple that we are getting ready to interview, we love them. We just felt like there was a connection off the bat, and I think you guys are going to love them also. And so, first, this is Bill and Christina Schindler. Thank you guys so much for joining us on our podcast today.
Absolutely our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
So, just so you know, Christina Schindler is the CEO of the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, and we'll talk all about what that is later. But it's a foodery in Chestertown, Maryland, that optimizes nutrition and modern foods through ancestral techniques to create healthy food for the community. Christina is also her husband's high-tech other half. Her husband, Dr. Bill Schindler, is the author of Eat Like a Human, Nourishing Foods and Ancient Ways of Cooking to Revolutionize Your Health. And this is a fantastic book. I read it, and I guarantee this is a book like you've never read before, including a whole chapter on the nutrition and insects. But I just thought I'd throw that in there. Yeah, we'll get into that. But Bill is an internationally known archaeologist, primitive technologist, chef, and co-star of the National Geographic channel series, The Great Human Race, which aired in 2016 in 171 countries. And we will definitely talk to you about this also. This is an amazing series. We'll talk about it through this podcast. And then in addition to supporting Christina in the operations of the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, Bill founded and directs the Eastern Shore Food Lab with a mission to preserve and revive ancestral dietary approaches to create a nourishing, ethical, and sustainable food system. Christina serves as president of the Eastern Shore Food Lab. So without any further ado, Bill and Christina, man, I can't wait for our audience to learn about you guys.
Yeah.
So first, how did you get started in this whole thing of following?
Because you guys were teachers, college professors or teachers,
Yeah.
right?
We're both educators in
Okay.
training. So we met in college at the College of New Jersey, and Bill was secondary ed history. I was elementary ed history, and then we both went, into actually public education.
Yeah.
And after it took you 13 years to get your undergrad,
10.
10,
Thank you very
sorry.
much.
He's a slow learner.
That's okay. I'll never forget. We taught our first year. I taught fifth grade. You taught high school history and coached wrestling after he wrestled at Ohio State. And he's like, I want to go back to school and get my PhD. I was like, are you kidding me? You just got out. Like, it took you 10 years to do the undergrad. And now, so it's, we joke that he got through his doctorate and his master's faster than he did his undergrad. So he has a lot faster.
Almost half the time. Yeah.
Yeah, so he
Probably
has his
because you cared
PhD.
more about it.
Yeah. So he has his PhD in archaeology. And since he went back, I ended up going back and I have my master's in educational technology. So literally his high tech other half. So while he was making stone tools, I was programming computers. So my background specifically is in assistive technology for people with disabilities. So we both just left the educational world, him as a professor, and I was the supervisor of special ed. And now we have a full-time family business and restaurant, which is crazy.
Now you said you just did. What do you mean by just?
2 years ago.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
So I think what's really interesting is we both love and are passionate about teaching. And teaching takes a lot of different forms. Christina has been in the classroom. She's been the director of special ed for some of the counties here. And, from a public education perspective, I taught high school history for a year, loved teaching, loved things in the past, but realized high school really wasn't my thing. And I wanted something that was a lot older. That's kind of why I dove into archaeology and was a college professor for a little over 20 years. But we realized that, when we really want to help people in whatever way that we possibly can. And we've spent the last really 20 years now, our oldest daughter just turned 20 years of our life figuring out how to nourish our family. And certainly nobody has all the answers, including us. I think we at least are at the point where we're starting to at least ask the right questions. But we figured out a lot of things that has been very helpful towards nourishing our own family. And we wanted to share it with as many people as we possibly could, both in an educational perspective. So it's one of the reasons I wrote the book. That's why we have the Eastern Shore Food Lab, the nonprofit, and we run all sorts of classes, which I know we'll get into later. And just as importantly, we wanted to be able to create the same food that nourished our family and provide it to the community. And that's how why we opened. The foodery thing, we've been calling it a foodery for years because we met in a restaurant and said we never own a restaurant, but actually come to
The
the
owner. So right now we're sitting on the second floor of our nonprofit, the Eastern Shore Food Lab, and below us we probably have 12 people right now working and feeding the community. So if you see us look to the side, it's because the front door is that way, and like we might be seeing, you know, somebody. So it is really exciting to know that not only are we nourishing the community with healthy food, but we also are employing over 20 people in the community too, which is really exciting.
Well, let's just get into it. Why is your foodery different from the other restaurants we see around town?
All right.
So we make everything 100% from scratch. And I know people say that often and they say, oh yes, this is from scratch. But when we say scratch made, we mean that we are bringing in the raw ingredients and we're transforming them into recognizable food. So today we will get 65 gallons of milk delivered, and we're not selling milk. That milk will be transformed into cheese that's going to go onto our pizzas. It'll be made into cream cheese. It'll be made into yogurt. What else are we making out of that yet?
And
it'll go into our
fermented
coffee.
Cream and
Fermented cream. It will go into our lattes, our cappuccinos, things like that. So when people,
and this milk comes from where?
It's as local as we can get. So it's about 35 miles from here. So Maryland, you can't have raw milk. We would ideally have raw milk, but that's illegal here. So we get milk from Nice Creamery, which it pasteurizes at the lowest legal temperature possible, and we can actually make cheese from it.
Okay.
Yeah, and one thing that's important, and I don't know if we're going to get into this or not, so I'm just going to mention it very quickly. The cheese making process, when done traditionally and correctly, just replicates our own natural digestive process when we as infants were consuming milk from our mothers. So if we pasteurize the milk at the level that most milk today is pasteurized, you actually can't make cheese out of it. It screws up the proteins, and you can't get a curd to set properly and all these other sorts of things.
Just real quick on that, just to explain to people what pasteurized is, because I think a lot of people may not even know the difference between pasteurized, homogenized, and all these terms we're hearing with milk. So just real quick.
I've done a rabbit hole, I promise.
No dissertation.
Milk coming out of our mothers, any mammal mother, whether it's a rat or a whale or a human.
Props while you're chatting?
Get some props. Coming out of it is raw, right? It's raw. It's loaded with beneficial bacteria. It's in the state of fermentation. Those bacteria are eating the sugars, the lactose in the milk, creating all sorts of changes, beneficial changes in that milk, and making it safer for a number of different reasons, making it more nourishing, making it easier for our bodies, whether again we're humans or rats or whales, to get the nutrients from that milk. We've been consuming milk at least 10,000 years from other animals as humans. So, and the entirety of that time until recent times, that milk was raw, right? Not pasteurized directly, and typically raw and then fermented. Raw milk left alone will naturally ferment on its own, and other things we can dive into as we move forward. Just a very quick example. This is a stomach of an unweaned goat from Sardinia. And
now I'm sorry if you guys been on the podcast, but we also put all these podcasts on YouTube, so you'll be able to do what he's showing. No, you keep showing.
So if you can't see this is a dry stomach from an unweaned goat. And just real quickly, why this is important. We went to Sardinia to learn some of the most ancestral traditional cheese making in the world, and this is the most basic. They have
This is July. We were just
July, yeah. If you take a goat, an unweaned goat, a goat that's still and any mammal in general, but and you have it drink from its mother, it is still producing, because it's unweaned, and the only thing in its diet is its mother's milk. It still produces all the enzymes to transform it into its safest and most nourishing form possible. In fact, what all mammals do is we make cheese in our stomachs. And an example I always give is if you're burping a baby on your shoulder and it spits up and it looks like cottage cheese and smells like provolone, it's because that's what it is. So they let these baby goats, God, I didn't mean to say baby, unweaned goats milk from their mothers, and then they take the stomachs out and hang them up, and 2 weeks later there's cheese. It's some of the strongest, most powerful cheese in the world. And they eat the entirety of the goats, and nothing goes to waste. But the point is, the cheese, real traditional cheese, whether it's from Greece or France or Italy or wherever, is an incredible food that mimics how we digested milk as we were infants. And it's a completely different food than ultra pasteurized skim milk. The reason it's important to this part of the conversation is, like I started to mention, if you heat the milk too high, which most pasteurized milk is, especially ultra pasteurized milk, and then you have that sort of Parmalat, like stuff in a box that doesn't even need a refrigerator. That's ultra high temperature pasteurized. It'll last for 10 years in a box. Those are completely different foods. And in my mind, should never go into our bodies.
Right.
But the milk that Christina was mentioning, we can get this milk. They pasteurize it at the lowest legal temperature possible. The proteins aren't screwed up enough to still be able to make milk out of or cheese out of it. And that's what we use as the basis for all of our cheese now. Until we can scale.
Yeah, and that I definitely, that just kind of leads right into the whole fermentation process and all that stuff that honestly, we're just now learning now that we've gotten in with you and this group that we're in now, for the last, 2-3 years. We didn't even really understand the fermentation, all that kind of stuff. But it's amazing, just like you said, as far as how good the bacteria is that's in the milk and why it's crazy that they do the pasteurization kind of. And it's so weird. I just want people to understand how, they've kind of made everybody germaphobes. Oh my gosh, wash your hands, wash your feet, wash your, wash everything. Don't, wash all your food before you put it in your pantry and all that crud. But then on this other side, they're saying, oh, probiotics are so important. Your gut microbiome is so important. You got to take these. Like, okay, which is it? Is bacteria good or bad? We know bacteria is good for us. But if you wouldn't mind, I know this is a rabbit hole also, but you can go down. But I love it. But the fermentation process. What is fermentation, and why is that so good for our food and for our actual bodies?
Your mother-in-law, my mother had a book when I was a kid, and I remember something in the book that said if an alien came to Earth and documented the amount of bacteria in your average bathroom and an average kitchen, they'd find more bacteria in an average kitchen than they find in a bathroom. And it was meant to scare you, right? This was a book in the 70s or 80s or something where they were trying to show us how dirty we are in our kitchens and we have to be more sanitary. But the reality is, thank God there's that much bacteria in our kitchen, because we require that bacteria to transform raw materials into something that our bodies can truly get nourished from. Mm-hmm. And some of them, and for anybody who's all the bacteria and the whatever, some of the most valued foods in our world today, when they're made traditionally and correctly, go through a fermentation process. Cheese, salami, sauerkraut. Not that many people value sauerkraut, but it's an amazing food. Mm-hmm. Real bread. All of those are fermented. But so is the highest quality chocolate in the world has a fermentation step. The highest quality coffee in the world has a fermentation step in it. Obviously, wine, beer, mead, all those sorts of things as well. So, and I've never found a society in the world, and we've traveled, we've lived and worked with a bunch of different communities. We've, read a bunch of, I've never heard of a group in the world, a traditional diet that doesn't have fermentation at its core. And it's not just for flavor. It's not just for increasing storage, but it's also for making that food as nourishing as it can possibly be.
Right.
Right. So since you talked about the different places you traveled, we definitely want to hear about Sardinia, but I also want you to talk about, where was it when you guys did the milk blood? Glory? Actually,
you're going to take this one while I get a prop.
Oh, you're going to get a prop now. All right. I actually think there's a picture. Yeah. Actually, if you look over, my head, that way. That's our son right there doing, gosh, he just turned 18. So that was in 2017, 2018. He's just grown a lot recently. But we were in Kenya, and we were with the Samburu
Warriors, yeah.
In Kenya, and we did blood and milk, and we consumed blood and milk with them, and that's the way they subsist. And it was a very interesting experience because we lived abroad for a year. We were in Ireland as our home base, and then we had the opportunity, being kind of already across the pond, to be able to get to a lot of other places a lot easier and more economically, because we are a family of 5. So we've got three kids, 2 girls and a boy. So traveling with them was always exciting, and seeing how they reacted to different cultures was always something as well, because they are very unique individuals. And our youngest, Alyssa, is an animal lover at heart. So when we did the blood and the milk, and it was very traditional, we were in the bush, she wanted no parts, because she didn't understand that the cow was not being killed, that it was just being punctured, almost like you give blood and just take some blood. Right. It was the same type of thing for the cow, but she wanted no parts of it. The other 2 was fine. And kind of our approach in terms of parenting is meet them where they are, try to stretch them, of course, but also respect their wishes on some of those things too, especially when it comes to ethical issues that way. But This would be the arrow, and you could see the point here that literally did pierce the cow. puncture the cow. So the warriors were there. They had this little bow and arrow, and it was a very symbolic role to be able to be the person in the tribe who would pierce the cow, and they would collect the blood in a gourd that was hollowed out from fire. So you have to just kind of viscerally imagine all this. So you're having the smell kind of blood, but then it's being captured in a gourd that the inside of the gourd had smoke and ash in it. So that's been charred out. So you've got that smoky ash fire smell going on with blood. Then you mix that with fresh milk, which is also in a gourd. And then you pour them together.
And the milk and the blood come from the same animal, right?
Not the exact, I mean, they're both cows, but the cow that they get the blood from isn't, they go over here and milk a cow and they go over here.
Okay.
Yes. So there was the special role of who shot the arrow, and we were very lucky to be able to get the arrow and take that home with us. Then there was another role.
We traded for it. We didn't steal it.
We traded.
Don't worry, they won't see this.
We thought we traded our daughter and married her off at one point too. That's another story. But that was with another tribe. So, and then there was another special role for, it was a younger young man who caught everything and then mixed it. And then they also had a stick that they would mix the blood and the milk together, and it would coagulate onto the stick. And then that was the treat that they gave to the dogs. And then that was a delicacy for the dogs. They used absolutely everything. And then it was in a gourd, and the gourd was passed around, and we all got to drink from the gourd. And it was just because also of the smell with the smoky flavor. I mean, it was very, very intense. It almost looked like a strawberry milk. I know that sounds horrible, but it was that kind of color because it was just the pinkish. You said it tasted like
I thought it tasted like an irony chocolate milkshake, but nobody else agreed with me.
Milkshake's a stretch of a word there, but it's like if you cut yourself and you kind of suck it to, stop the bleeding. It was that type of
metallic taste.
Yes, thank you. Metallic taste, not a milkshake. Metallic.
What I think is really, really important here too is, and I know some people listening to this are, still trying to maybe like get over a hump and start to eat sourdough as the next step, and this is like way too far. And I understand it. Believe me, we don't drink blood and milk all the time.
No,
rarely.
I don't.
Rarely. But rarely. But what is important here, I think, the big takeaways, and one of the reasons we wanted to be with them is, first off, we have been around a lot of people around the world. This group was by far, just visually looking at them and interacting with them, the healthiest people, healthiest humans we've ever been around. Ever.
Why did they look like?
They were the epitome of what I think, if you put Michelangelo somewhere and said, okay, make a statue of what the perfect human form would be, they'd be the model. They were tall and lean, muscular, but not like, bodybuilder muscle, right, at perfect proportions. But what I think the big takeaways were, and some of this is a little Western price-ish in a good way, big, broad, white smiles, white teeth, big, broad faces. Their eyes were, not only white, because, in a lot of populations, you get sort of that yellowing going on or bloodshot. I mean, beautiful white eyes, but just their, and I don't want to get hokey, like tree huggy kumbaya here, but they were like they just emanated health and vibrance and just excitement and happiness. I mean, it was wonderful. And the common thing in their diet every single day is blood and milk. Blood and milk
on it
every day. The men and the boys, when they leave for the dry season, and during the dry season, there's not enough food, and they don't feed their animals. Eat, even though they're domesticated, eat just wild forage, right? So they don't bring food to them. And during the dry season, the plants are so dried up and they don't have a whole lot of nutrition value that the animals not only have to eat a massive amount of it, but they have to go searching for food all the time. So during the dry season, the animals just take off, and the men and the boys go and follow them and leave for months. When they go, they bring this arrow, they bring a little bow and a gourd and a knife, and that's it. They eat every day, twice a day, blood and milk, and that's all they have. The women and the children back in the village.
Now you're saying only while they're following the animals, that's all they have twice a day, is that, or even when they're back with the women?
When they're back, when they're following the animals, that's all they have. Back in the village, they have some other things they supplement with, but they eat very few, like almost non-existent vegetable foods. And they don't eat meat that much. So as many people that are listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, how horrible is that they like pierce these cows all the time with these arrows. first off, getting a liter of blood from a cow is a lot less percentage-wise of their blood than us giving blood, right? So, and the cows aren't even flinching. They don't eat meat. They will eat meat, but they rarely kill one of their animals. They look at their animal as a renewable resource that are always creating milk and always creating blood, renewable resources. If they killed an animal, they'd have a big feast and then that animal's gone and that's it. So if an animal's older or injured or something and they have to, harvest it, they will eat, of course they'll eat the blood and the organs and the meat, but on a typical basis, this is what they have. And if somebody's sick or pregnant or lactating with increased nutritional needs, they have it more than twice a day. And then we came back here to Maryland and, at the time I was still teaching at the college and we're always having these conversations with people about sustainable food systems and feeding the world and everybody being healthy. And it dawned on me that we had just been with, the healthiest people we've ever encountered in our lives. And the only two things in their diet, the main things in their diet, blood and raw milk. Of those two things here in Maryland, raw milk is illegal and blood is really hard to get. And not to suggest, again, that we need to be drinking blood and raw milk all the time, but if we're really going to have a conversation about what is the healthiest human diet, how do we feed a growing population, how do we get the most amount of resources from what we already have, and we're not even considering the two things that are the mainstay of the healthiest people we've ever seen.
Right. And including going back to, like you said, you kind of mentioned the nose to tell a little bit, and I don't know if a lot of people know that term. And also when you said they don't eat meat because of that, but what other things do they eat? Do they eat the organs mainly when they do kill one of these? Is what nutrient do they tend to go to? Because you talked about in your book or on the episode or something about how animals didn't actually eat the meat when they're like lions and everything, didn't actually eat the meat. They mainly ate the organs and the meat was left for us. So kind of along that same lines, how do they do that with the other food they eat there? So
full transparency, the time that we spent with them, and this isn't uncommon, they didn't eat any meat or organs just because they didn't kill any. But they will, when they do kill an animal, from what I've read and understand, they will eat the entirety of that animal. The blood, the fat, the organs, and the meat. The point about other predators like lions and those sorts of things, and you started to mention this, they will eat meat, there's no doubt. But the preferred first thing that they eat when they take down their prey is the insides, the blood, the fat, and the organs. And they gorge themselves on this. And when they go and to digest the food and go off and sleep or whatever, they leave a whole bunch of flesh on many of these animals that hyenas and buzzards and humans with stone tools can go in and harvest that meat before they come back. And they'll come back and finish the animal at some point. But the point was, when you look at the predators, apex predators, top of the food chain, when they take down their prey, what they're after is not to sit there and chewing on the shoulder. It's to rip it apart and to eat all of the offal, the blood, the fat, and the organs, which is the most nutrient-dense bioavailable parts of the animal. And then they'll go in and obviously, get the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Now, in Modern Stone Age kitchen, do you guys serve the organs?
We do, but not in the sense of like a plate of organs type thing. So one thing that we try to do is we want to make foods that are recognizable, foods that people eat every day, as healthy and nourishing as possible. So a good example of that is this morning, breakfast sandwich. You could go to your local gas station and you get the bagel with the bacon, egg, and cheese. And so ours would be a sourdough bagel or a sourdough croissant. Bill has mastered the art of a sourdough croissant. They're so flaky and so full of really great butter. And then we in-house butcher for our for our bacon and our sausage. And we also make scrapple. So scrapple is a great example of incorporating the organ meat, but it's not saying necessarily that there's organ meat, because I feel like we have two types of customers. We have the customers who come in because they know it's healthy and they're ready to try anything. Then we have others who, follow us in the story and the message, and they want that. They want the scrapple. They want the pate. They want the liverwurst, because you can't get those things in other places. Mm-hmm. So it's, trying to meet people where they are. But, today's Friday. Yeah. So this evening is a great example. We do our wood-fired pizzas tonight. So everything's 100% made from scratch. So it's a sourdough crust. It's our homemade cheese. Our meat lovers has our homemade pepperoni and sausage on it. We've got a special tonight that's got butternut squash from the local farm. But that takes us all week to make. And that's the one thing that's really different about our restaurant is Cisco is not rolling up with the big truck and dropping off more mozzarella cheese so we can serve it, the rest of the days of the week. Because people ask us that, like, why are you only open on Fridays for pizza? Because it takes us all week to make the ingredients.
Right.
So we bring in all the raw ingredients, whether it's half a pig or 65 gallons of milk or bags of flour. And then our team is transforming them into nourishing and delicious foods that are recognizable.
As far as like that organ piece, like Christina mentioned, so we're not hiding the fact that it has organs, but we're celebrating that it does. Some people, they just want scrapple, and this is really good scrapple. Scrapple traditionally would have that in there anyhow. And if
I've never heard
Do you not know scrapple?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So what was the title of that blog post we did? We called it. It was I
don't know.
An awful bone broth bomb or something like that. Awful meaning, and when I say the term awful, it's a Dutch term. It literally means all the things when a butcher is butchering an animal for the cuts that would typically be in a grocery store that you would recognize. All the stuff that falls off is awful.
So all the organ meat.
All the organ meats are, really low quality cuts or bones or joints and that sort of thing, which is the basis, as we just talked about, some of the most nourishing food possible. Scrapple it's an East Coast traditional food. It's brilliant. It can be made of, like any other food, in a way that's not so healthy or a way that is incredibly healthy. But this is typically what happens. And it's usually pork. So all the organs, the bones, the head, all those pieces of a pig, the skin would go into it at some level. So this is how we make it. When we take the back leg of a pig to make and bone it out to make hams, everything that's left, the skin, extra meat that's hanging on the shank, the foot, all of that stuff, we put into a pot and we start to simmer it for hours to make this incredibly collagen-rich, beautiful bone broth. And then when that comes off, we take all the skin and all the meat, all the connective tissue, and we grind it. And then we take an equal amount of liver, heart, and kidney by weight of the skin and the meat, and we grind that as well. And then that all gets mixed together with a bunch of spices, things like sage, for example, salt, and it gets all cooked up. And then you have to add some sort of a binder. A lot of times people will add flour, which we don't use raw flour in anything. We always ferment our flour. So that isn't an option for us. A lot of times people add buckwheat. It's very traditional, but buckwheat is like off the charts high in a toxin called oxalate. So we would never use that. So a lot of times people add cornmeal. Now we use an ancient process with all of our corn, all of our maize, called nixtamalization. It's a 4,000-year-old process. It's how real traditional masa or tortillas are made. So when we nixtamalize our maize and then grind it, what the result of it is this masa, this really nutrient dense, beautiful, like cornmeal, really is what it's like. And that's what we add as the binder. And you cook it till it's super, super thick, kind of like polenta, and you put it in loaf pans, let it cool overnight, and then you turn it out and you cut it into slices. And then it's already cooked, but you kind of fry the outside. We throw it in a fryer filled with animal fat, filled with lard. It's awesome. But think about what's in there. It's filled with collagen, filled with all sorts of amazing nutrients, bone broth, meat, organs, all of it in the same thing. It's awesome.
I can't wait. We will definitely be trying that.
And I
with,
do share.
with you.
I am a recovering vegetarian.
Yeah, that's true.
So like when he goes through that, it's like, oh my gosh. So when we got married, I was vegetarian. I was one for 15 years. And it wasn't until our oldest daughter was born and I was nursing that I actually started craving meat again. So it's so funny to hear you list all those things off, because I'm still getting there, but I'm the type of person that I don't necessarily need to know those ingredients. I just know it's really, really good. And I think that's the bottom.
You do like it. Yeah.
That is. And I think for us too, for your people who are listening, that from an economical standpoint, it's fantastic to be able to use, now of course, nutritionally, we all know that, but we can bring in half a pig for $130. And what we're able to do so that's for us from a restaurant perspective, from a value add, we're putting it into the people, like our money goes into people who are able to then turn that half a pig into the bacon and the sausage and the scrapple and all the other things and the bone broth that we make from it, because everything is utilized.
Mhm.
Absolutely everything. So from a business perspective, it is a great model, even though we
Well-
always joke, if anybody said that this should have worked when we started this 2 years ago, and this kind of was a whole COVID thing too, that this all came about, it should not have worked. And we have no business background at all, yet
It's working.
it is.
Well, because
Somehow.
it's a good, but you mentioned it earlier, that nose to tail piece, and Christina, we just talked about it. This is a nose to tail approach. So, the idea is when you harvest an animal, whether it's a pig or a chicken, or you're in the woods and it's a deer or it's a duck, you're using the entirety of that animal, completely nose to tail, foot to beak, I don't know, whatever it is. But Christina mentioned from a business perspective, it makes complete sense because nothing goes to waste. From a nutritional perspective, the parts that typically don't end up in the grocery store are the parts we just talked about, the most nutritionally dense and bioavailable parts of the animal. So from a nutritional perspective, it makes sense. But also from an ethical and sustainability perspective, it makes complete sense. It rests, the average weight of a pig in the U.S. is 55%, and of a cow is 50%, is how much of that animal by weight ends up on the grocery store shelves as food for humans.
That's crazy.
That's
And then
crazy.
And then what do they do the rest of it in the industrial processing of it? Do they just, is that where hot dogs and stuff come from, or?
No,
Not-
I would
not even
include
that.
hot dogs in the grocery store shelf part of this.
Right.
The rest of it ends up. It depends on who the processor is. A lot of different points of that food chain, who they are and what they're after. Sometimes it ends up as fertilizer. Sometimes it ends up in other products. Sometimes it ends up as dog food. The reality is, at numerous places in that industrialized system, you have a lot of waste. A whole lot of it ends up as just waste. So, to me, it sits with me a lot better. If you're going to take an animal, harvest it, and use almost 100% of it as food to nourish your family or your community, it rests a lot better with me. I mean, that is not only ancestrally appropriate, but from an ethical and sustainability perspective, it makes sense. And like Christina mentioned, from a business perspective, it makes sense. From a nutritional perspective, it makes sense. All around, it's completely a win-win.
Right.
And in order to make that happen, the other thing that's cool is, as a consumer or somebody that's trying to just nourish their family, the best way to make that happen is to, take links out of your food chain and get closer to it. Go to a farmer's market or raise animals yourself, or go hunting, or at least bring a whole chicken home from a grocery store. And the shorter you can make that food chain, literally the entire world wins, including your own family.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think what's really great that you guys are doing is not just having this restaurant where you have all of this really healthy food, but you guys have classes, right? And you teach people how to do what you do, like how to make the cheese, how to butcher the pig, all that stuff. Because I know I bought your sourdough course, and
Oh, that's
I've watched
right.
I've watched the course. I bought all the stuff you told me to buy, and I have not started.
Well, you need to come out then, and we'll do it together. And that's the easiest way.
Yeah.
Oh, we would love that.
Yeah.
Now, she did learn how to make yogurt, though, from scratch. So now she makes her own yogurt instead of us getting from the store. Or
Right,
we're gonna
because
mix it.
and that is one thing I've heard both of you say in different types of interviews and things. If you guys want to talk about something with an easy way maybe to incorporate what you guys are doing. I mean, this is huge, what you guys, all this stuff. I mean, of course, it's a restaurant, you have help, but just like you tell people to take one thing that they really like, and then to learn how to cook it from scratch, to make it from scratch. Is that?
Why don't you tell them the story about when I went off to do the show and you were left?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think what's important for your listeners to realize is, yes, we have a restaurant now, but this is how we've raised our kids. So our kids just turned literally in the last week, 20, 18, and 16, which is crazy. So they're not kids anymore, but they always will be, I guess, our kids.
We're going to keep saying kids.
So, and to be transparent as well, we did not make homemade baby food for them. Okay. They ate, as you don't like me to say this,
we
they
didn't know
ate
yet.
chicken nuggets. We didn't. And that's where you are on your journey. And you have to make sure that you give yourself some grace and realize where you are and that you can't do all this overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It is impossible. So that idea is, if you pick one thing, if you think about what your family eats a lot and try to change that. One of the things for us in the beginning was sandwich bread, because our kids had a sandwich for lunch. every day. So I know you've written a blog post on it. It's on the website, Eat Like a Human, about, I forget the number off the top of my head, but do the math, right? 180 days times 12 years. If you could just change the loaf of bread that they're eating to a wild, slow fermented sourdough, like the health implications for your kids just go through the roof. Another big one for us was yogurt. First of all, yogurt's expensive.
Good yogurt is expensive.
Good yogurt. And our kids would eat that like dessert. I mean, they almost enjoyed that over ice cream sometimes. So being able to source good milk and make yogurt at home, that was a game changer for us from a health perspective, but also from a financial perspective. But I need to say that Bill does the cooking in the family. I can clean really, really well. So those were our roles. And we were delineated, and it works. It still does. Same thing here. He does all the cooking downstairs and I do all the other stuff with business. But then all of a sudden, as we're 50-50 with everything, he gets the National Geographic TV show, which we were not anticipating. It was a junk mail that he found in his spam folder. I mean, it's just crazy how that all came about. But you found out in January that they were looking to do the show. They wanted a professor of bushcraft. That was January. By April, he was on a plane to Africa. So it was like complete whirlwind. And when you're 50-50, that was hard for us. And the kids were
12, 10, and 8.
Yeah, 12, 10, and 8 that year. So, right in the middle of crazy sports, just really intense, and everything was going on. And this is the guy who made and cooked everything in the house.
Right.
So I definitely felt a huge burden of trying to continue feeding the kids as healthy as possible with him not being there. And he was gone for a month at a time filming, and then would come back for 2 weeks, and then would go off for another month and then come back for 2 weeks. So one thing that we all had every morning for breakfast was we would do kefir shakes. And I just know that Bill would get up before we went to bed, and he would go in the cabinet and he would take out these grains, these white grains, and do something on the counter with it. And I didn't know what the heck he did, but all I know is he took milk out of the fridge, cold milk, and poured it over the grains, and then put cold milk in the cabinet. And that just blew my mind, because milk's supposed to be refrigerated. Like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't know how you take refrigerated milk and put it in the cabinet at room temperature, and we're eating this and we're not, dying because we've been poisoned with bad, milk. But he just did it, and it tasted good, so we were fine. And it was just this mystery that he did. Well, then he showed me how to do it. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? It took like 30 seconds. And it was like the simplest thing. And in my mind, I'm giving you a lot of credit for this like huge task that he was doing for years. But literally all he was doing was taking these grains, scraping them, pouring off the excess, because that was the kefir, what we would drink. And we use like the Vitamix. So you would put them right in the little Vitamix container, so we could just like blend a shake with peanut butter or bananas or something. And then he would pour milk on top of it and put it in the cabinet, and that was it. Yeah. So I think that's like a huge takeaway for me as I was starting to learn, because this was not the way. I mean, my mom cooked every night a full meal, sit down with courses, well, not courses, but a side, a starch, a main, that type of thing. But we didn't have containers bubbling on the counters. Like, things weren't fermenting that way. So this was all new for me. And what was a big takeaway as being a very, very busy mom with 3 little kids and a full-time career was the inactive time, how important that was, because what I actually had to do to make that food at the end of the day for the kids was minimal. Mm-hmm. Right. But what I had to do was plan it, because you couldn't just come home. Like, if you want sourdough bread for dinner, you couldn't just come home and put that in the oven. You needed to have that fermentation process. So I think that's a big one for your listeners, is planning ahead. It's like a 2 to 3 day, at least plan ahead, but knowing that inactive time, because all that bacteria is doing the work for you. You've got your own little microcosm, which is awesome. And that what you actually have to do is very, very minimal when it comes down to it.
I think there's 2 other really important things that we've learned. One is, and Christina mentioned it earlier a couple times, if you really want to make the biggest impact possible on yourself or your family, then really sit down and figure out what is it that you eat either every day or every week or on a very regular basis. And that's what you should target first. Because if we tend to, I think nowadays, we want that magic pill. We want that one big thing that's going to swoop in and solve all of our problems. And the reality is, it's a small change implemented day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, that is going to truly transform your health. So, and one of the examples I give quite often is, there was a year when I was really getting into cooking and learning, and I said, what's that?
You're really getting into
I was getting into it and diving deep, and I'm like, oh my God, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make Thanksgiving dinner 100% from scratch. Like everything. I'm going to make the cheese. We're going to make everything's going to.
You know the green bean casserole, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
the classic.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you guys still have that. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he was making the Funyuns on top,
Everything.
like the mushroom soup he made, and
There-
like source the green beans. Like
There were wild mushrooms we harvested. I mean, it was the entirety of that dinner. Nobody put two ingredients together outside of our own kitchen. Like,
Yeah.
And you know what? We sat down. It took me weeks to make this dinner. Everybody sat down, and everybody enjoyed most of it. She didn't like the green bean casserole because she likes the French's onions. But anyhow, we left, and everybody left after dinner, and I patted myself. I did it, and it was cool.
Yeah.
And then the next day, I woke up, and then I remember we're eating whatever the regular breakfast was, and I'm like, I didn't do anything. Like it was a cool event, but
Right.
I didn't. I mean, and did I nourish everybody there at some level for one meal? One meal. I didn't really do anything to help the health of. I mean, I didn't kill anybody, obviously, but I didn't do anything to really make an impact on their health. And it really got me thinking, like, what should we? And that's when I started thinking about the bread, right? What is it? The kids are eating a sandwich every day for lunch. If we make the healthiest bread possible, that's 2 slices of bread every day, the entirety of the time they're in school. That makes a big impact.
Yes.
The second thing that I think came out of that as well is that other than the green bean casserole, which didn't match the standard, like I didn't put anything strange on that table. It wasn't like a whole plate of crickets or a whole, a blood milkshake that for Thanksgiving. Everything on that table was recognizable. It was early in my cooking, so I mean, certainly I could have done a little bit better, but it all tasted good. But it was all nourishing food. So I think we all have a very similar approach. And we're very low carb. We're very animal based.
Yep.
When we include vegetables in our diet, they're very selective, and we're making sure we process them the right way. But the reality is, there's very few families that are 100% low carb, carnivore, whatever it is. There might be somebody in that family that is that way, but there's still at least one other person or 2 or 3 or 5 other people that need to be nourished as well, that are trying to eat a more, say, modern diet. What we've done with our family and what we've done with this foodery restaurant is, and again, Christina mentioned this earlier, we're trying to make food that people can recognize. It's familiar, as healthy and nourishing as it can possibly be. And the reality is almost all of the food we enjoy today has some sort of ancestral or traditional root. Like it was healthy at some point. Real pizza actually can be healthy. Real tacos can be really, really healthy. And that's what we're trying to get back to here. Certainly we will cater to carnivore, keto, low carb, whatever, and we are much of that. But an entire family can come in and eat food that they can feel really good about.
Right. Because we like that about the sourdough, listening to you guys, because we're the same way, low carb, real food, that's about the simplest we can make it. It's just like real meat, fruits, and vegetables. Yeah. And of course, the vegetables, a whole big thing. But people, the pushback we get a ton is like, I have to have my bread. How am I supposed to do everything without my bread? And,
I love my sandwiches. I love my bread. It's okay.
Right. Because, it's taken us years, but we don't ever buy it. We don't ever go to the store and buy bread. And so now it's like, so we get to bring bread back in. That's why I'm excited to make sourdough, but I haven't done it yet.
And definitely explain the huge difference. When we talk about sourdough bread, we don't mean go to your grocery store and pick up sourdough bread off there. That is not sourdough bread. That's not bread. What's in the store, that's not bread at all. That's just sugar, ultra processed carbohydrates, and vegetable and seed oils. I mean, it's just horrible. So what is the difference? What is sourdough bread? What do you teach us, and what are we going to be learning from you?
Well, you could do it, but I just want to do one point about what you said about the store, because this is really I feel bad for the consumers out there, because they'll hear the message about sourdough, so they'll go to a store to pick up a sourdough loaf and they say it's branded sourdough. Great, throw it in the cart. But there's no regulation on calling anything sourdough. So if you actually flip over the package, I guarantee yeast is right in there. Right. And that would not then be a sourdough bread if it's a yeasted bread, if it's not a wild. But like I always think of Hanover pretzels. That's the classic one. Everybody thinks of that sourdough hard pretzel. Read the label. It's not. Same thing, getting back to our earlier conversation about cheese. real mozzarella cheese, if you flip it over, it doesn't matter how beautiful the ball of mozz is. It's in the brine with the Italian flag. Guaranteed there's vinegar or something in the label, and it hasn't gone through the fermentation process. Right. It's the same type of thing. So
they actually speed that process up to put it on their store shelves, though. So that's where it ruins it all. So like the yeast, you were talking about the yeast and how did I'm making you squirrel.
No. This is how important it is. We had a woman in here yesterday that had her first sandwich in 20 years.
20
years.
And she was probably 60,
older.
I mean, yeah.
I'd say maybe
because I think it took her a while in her adult life to realize what her sensitivities were.
And so she's sensitivities to gluten, but she also has sensitivities to commercial baker's yeast. So here's the difference for anybody that really is confused. And there's the fact, if anybody's confused about any of this, but sourdough in particular, it's not, first of all, you're not alone, and it's intentional. Like the industrial food system is confusing people with sourdough on purpose. So here's the story with sourdough. Wonder Bread is made start to finish, from weighing out and mixing ingredients together to baking to cooling it down and putting it in a plastic sleeve in 1 hour. Start to finish. The entirety of the process takes 1 hour. Real, traditional, wild, long fermented sourdough bread is a multi-day process. And one of the big differences is, so in almost all bread making, it requires yeast, right? So there's yeast that's somehow introduced into the process, and the yeast eats carbohydrates and produces alcohol and carbon dioxide. If you're making beer, you want the alcohol. If you're making bread, we're not that worried about it because it gets cooked off in the bread making process. What's important in the bread making process is the creation of that carbon dioxide, which is the gas that makes the bread rise. So you're not eating a cracker, you're eating a loaf of bread. The wild yeast that happens in sourdough essentially does the same thing. So for this woman, the fact that it was wild yeast made a big difference because her body can't tolerate the commercial yeast. But the role of the yeast in that process is essentially the same whether you're making Wonder Bread or whether you're making sourdough bread. The difference with sourdough bread is that in addition to the wild yeast, you have wild bacteria. And if anybody's wondering where the wild bacteria comes from, it's on our skin, it's in the air, it's on the flour, it's on the tables, it's on the tools. All we do is create an environment where the wild yeast and the wild bacteria can thrive and do the job they need to do. So in sourdough, you have two fermentations. You have the yeast creating the carbon dioxide, and you have the bacteria that is breaking down and transforming that gluten and the other aspects of the flour into something completely different. And some of the benefits of it are this. One is the gluten is more easily tolerated by our human bodies. It's easier for us to digest and get the nutrients from that bread. The final product has more flavor in it because of that bacterial fermentation. And for anybody worried about their carbohydrate intake, the glycemic index is a lot lower because the result of both of those fermentations happening simultaneously, more of the starches, the sugars are eaten by the bacteria and the yeast. So the final product is lower in carbohydrates as well. It's a win-win.
So then are the bacteria still in the bread? So now when we're eating, we're actually eating that bacteria too?
Yes, except they're dead because they've been cooked. It's not like eating sauerkraut or yogurt, but they're in there. And I have seen a few studies. They're a little inconclusive, but there's some suggestions that even eating the dead wild bacteria and yeast that they've died through the cooking process still offer some nutritional advantage that we're not entirely confident what it does, but there's some work being done there now.
And remember, we have trillions of bacteria in our gut. We could not live without the bacteria in our gut. So that's what we're saying also through all this whole podcast is they taught everybody to be germaphobes. Oh my gosh, be careful of this, be careful of that. And we could not live without bacteria. Bacteria is very, very healthy as long as we have the right kind, the healthy kind of bacteria, because you can make, bacteria that is not good for you as well. But that's why the sourdough bread is amazing. And you've got a place where we can go on, not that we're over, but I just want to make sure we don't forget about this. You have a place where if somebody wanted to learn how to do sourdough bread, you actually have videos and everything where they show you exactly how to do a lot of
Yeah,
stuff, right?
we do. So through our Eastern Shore Food Lab, so it's Eat Like a Human, the name of the book. So that's our website. And on there, we've got online classes that people could go, and they're on demand. So literally you can click on there. Teresa, you got yours, the sourdough class. And they were filmed by Brandon Goolish, who also filmed the Nat Geo show. So it's a really nice collaboration that way. So they're all professionally done. So we've got fermented dairy on there and sourdough bread. Actually, you just did a nose to tail hot dog and hamburger that we have to post.
And a home butchering class.
And a home butchering, yeah.
They'll post next month.
Yeah. So he took the whole pig and broke it down. So they just filmed that one. So we try to meet people where they are, you know, whether they want to learn and do it in their home kitchen. If you don't want to, don't have the time, we ship, which is always a good thing too. And getting back to the sourdough, what has changed for me, I always hear, and we say it's sourdough bread, right? Sourdough bread all the time. They're connected. But Bill's figured out how to turn everything that's a carb pretty much into sourdough. So I know, Theresa, you were saying something about, you know, people who, but I don't want to give up my carbs. I don't want to give up my bread. Or you've got other people who are like, I don't want to give up my pasta or my crackers or my cookies. Well, he literally has figured out how to make all those things sourdough. Yeah. So right now downstairs, we've got a brown butter chocolate chip cookie. It's sourdough. Our peanut butter cookie, it's the homemade peanut butter and it's sourdough. Croissants, they are all sourdough. So that for me blew my mind because we were getting ready for Thanksgiving, probably here 2 years ago. And people are like, are you going to make pies? And I'm thinking, how are we going to make pies like sourdough? Because you can't. Well, lo and behold, that's why I do the cleaning and he does the cooking. We made sourdough pie crust. It was fantastic. The pies were excellent. So literally people know when they come in the door here, every grain that is here has been through the fermentation process. Yeah. And it's as healthy as possible.
And two very quick things, I'm glad you brought that up, that are really important for a consumer to think about if they want to start trying sourdough. And you mentioned one of them. Be wary in the grocery store. There is no federal or state or even community regulation on calling something sourdough. So you can slap sourdough on a label of anything and you don't have to justify it in any way. It means absolutely nothing in a grocery store. If you turn it over and it says yeast, baking soda, you know, anything like that will leaven the bread, then you can be fairly sure that it's not sourdough. In fact, in almost any grocery store, anything you'd find, I'm pretty guaranteed that it's not. There are a few exceptions, but in most cases they're not. But even in a bakery, like this is one of the things that the woman we were talking to yesterday that had her first sandwich told us, and I knew it was a thing, but what you can trust your local baker, right? I mean, your local baker is your one person, you know, there's one link in your food chain, you know, go there and ask them a question, but this is the question to ask. Is it truly sourdough? And if it is truly sourdough, are they also adding yeast? Because a lot of people will make a sourdough loaf of bread, mostly for the flavor profile and the ability to call it sourdough, but we'll still add some commercial yeast in because, and we can tell you right now, you know, nailing down the times and the temperatures and the fermentation to have the yeast fermentation, the bacterial fermentation match up properly when you stick it in the oven is quite difficult to do. And an easy way to kind of make sourdough, and you can call it sourdough, but still have it look like a really good loaf of bread without much work, is to add a little bit of commercial yeast. And that woman yesterday was telling us that she had talked to a whole bunch of bakers. They're making sourdough, and they actually add the commercial yeast. So it's a good question to ask. And what's really cool is it's super easy to make at home. Like super easy to make at home. A couple trials. It is one of those things, you know, watching a video is awesome, but doing it in person with somebody really helps because there's a couple just ways to move your hand and do some things that'll get you over, you know, a couple of weeks of learning, you know, very quickly. But it really is something you can easily do in your home and is a great place to start.
Now, in your home, are you saying do it with the yeast like you're saying our local baker would do it? Or you're saying do it the right way? Yeah. And that's mainly a time thing, right? Is that the difference between putting the yeast in and not putting the yeast in is because it just speeds up the process? Is that, and so you decrease a lot of the.
What you're really doing, you know, what we're really doing with all these fermentation things, and just another really quick side note that I think is important. Wherever anybody's listening and like, okay, they talk about sauerkraut and fermented vegetables or cheese making or bread making or beer making or even salami, which real salami is just a fermented raw meat. Any of those, what's really cool is if one of those, like really, if you like them all, but one of them is like really exciting to you, dive into that one, because any of those, the basics for any of them are just like the basics for the others. I mean, they're all fermentation. You're controlling wild yeast or wild bacteria or a combination of both. The bacteria that's responsible for making the primary bacteria responsible for making fermented sausages, like salami, for example, Lactobacillus plantarum is the primary bacteria responsible for making sauerkraut as well. I mean, there's so much overlap that if you start to learn one, you're going to get the basic skills that are going to help you with the other. But the cool thing about so what we're doing with the sourdough is we're controlling yeast and bacteria at the same time, and we can do it through a combination of time and temperature. One of the things that we started finding, and I wrote about it in the book some, and we talk about it in the video, is you do not have to, and this is what we wait to Saturday, you have a day off, there's no soccer games, you have nothing on your plate to make a loaf of sourdough bread over 10 hours. You can manipulate things, put it in the refrigerator, take it out, go to work, do this.
All right, so I need to give some reality on this one.
That's
That is real. No,
Christina, you've talked enough now.
But it has taken him a while to figure that out, because I will never forget when we came home from living abroad and we missed Ireland so much. And there's an Irish pub in like a town close to us. He brought his mother with us to dinner. And I'm not talking his mother. He brought the sourdough mother because he needed to stretch the dough at a certain point in time, because the mother, the sourdough, did control it. It was dough. You brought dough with us to dinner. And he had to get up from the dinner table to go stretch the dough, because he realized at that point, like, that was the timing. Now he's figured it out how he can put it in the fridge so we don't bring our mother with us to dinner, unless we want the real ones to come.
That's right.
But you're welcome. I'm exposing you. I think there's part of it that it has been a process, and it is easy once you figure it out. But it's funny, when we do the sourdough classes here, people don't realize the math that's involved. And even bakers that we've hired, they don't realize the math that's involved, because if you mess it up, guess what? We don't have bread the next day for our customers. It's a huge, huge issue. So, we have to take the temperature of the mother, which is really strange, but we take the temperature of the mother. We take the temperature of the flour, which again, just seems weird, but think about where you keep your flour in your house. Do you keep it down in your basement where your basement's colder? Do you keep it up in the pantry? Is it wintertime? Is it summer? All those things.
Some people keep it in the freezer to keep bugs out.
Some people do keep it in the freezer. Then we take temperature of the air, which for us in Maryland here, my goodness, with the humidity, we've gone, major extremes. Right now, it's really nice in terms our mother is behaving because of the nice temperatures. But the one thing that we can control then is the temperature of the water that goes into mixing our bread. So literally our bakers down there have a whole formula where they plug in the different temperatures of the things that we know. And then the one variable that they can control is the temperature of the water that they're adding. And that makes all the difference in the bread, because if they don't do that, guess what? We don't have bread. I mean, and literally, like, we've had footballs, we've had ones that don't rise. And I mean, it's a really big issue, because again, Sodexo's not rolling in and dropping off bread to us.
Right.
So, and one of the takeaways here is, because I don't want that to scare anybody.
Right.
You can make sourdough bread without ever taking out a calculator or a thermometer, but your bread is probably going to vary a little bit from this week to next week to next week. So you can make it without any of those things, and it's still going to be healthier than anything you can buy. Or, like Christina's mentioning, you can nail those variables down and make exactly the same loaf of bread and dial it all in this week, next month, in 2 years, spring, summer, winter, fall, whatever. We're harnessing trillions of wild bacteria and yeast, and they're doing a job for us. It's a several day process to make a beautiful, nourishing loaf of sourdough bread, but you're only actively engaged with it for like 15 minutes. Most of that time, those trillions of wild bacteria and yeast are doing this amazing job for you and transforming it into something more nourishing and more delicious. And you just have to put a little inputs in here and there.
Right. And that's why I like, Christina, when you're talking about food prep, and usually when we talk about food prep, like you said, it means know what you're going to eat the next week, know what you're going to eat the next day, make sure you have that stuff on hand. But this food prepping is get your stuff done and then just let it sit until it's ready. And we've got some really, really good friends, and they make the sourdough bread just like you guys do. Well, maybe not just like, but I mean, it's a healthy sourdough bread. And that's one thing they do, that they love pizza. And so once a week, they know they get the mother, they get the make sourdough bread, and then they know after a few days or whatever, now the bread's ready to make out into the pizza crust and everything. So we were talking about, you said where you guys do it. You also make the cookies, you make the pizza, you make all kinds of stuff out of it. So they're excited about learning all these different things that you can do with the sourdough bread. Also.
We have a whole class actually on sourdough mother, because everything that you can, because people do just think about bread, right? But all the other things that you can do with the mother. So one of the biggest things that we do is we make crackers here. So that's primarily mostly mother. The mother makes awesome pancakes and waffles. So like Saturdays here at the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, we do a huge breakfast spread, and that's one of our specialties. We do our big Belgian like sourdough waffles. So it's because sometimes when people start making sourdough, they have extra mother and they're like, I don't want a loaf of bread. But so there's other things that you can do with that as a byproduct too.
So when we mix our mother and let it ferment, that's our mother. All the leftover stuff we call the grandmother. And there's a big distinction between the two. You know, one's like ready to go and has all this energy. The other one's like still useful, but a little more tired. But the fresh mother is vibrant enough to lift big loads of bread, right? The grandmother is a little bit older and maybe isn't going to make this gorgeous loaf of bread, but still has that beautiful bacteria inside that can transform gluten into something that's more nourishing. So that's what we use in our cookies and our sourdough pasta and that sort of thing. And then when we have a whole bunch of grandmother, we put it together and call it a nursing home, but which also has some utilities. But we have those different distinctions are important. So this sourdough mother class, which we love, is not only how to start and maintain the sourdough mother, but how to do everything but bread with that mother, right? All the other things you might do. And the reality is many people today are a little more carbohydrate conscious, and maybe making bread all the time isn't the best use of this technology for their family. Or they might still be a little bit like, okay, bread maybe is a big step for me, and I want so this is a great entryway, and it's like crackers and you know and like pasta and all those other sorts of things. The thing to be aware of there for people, and this is more of a Google awareness, since COVID, everybody's talking sourdough. And we already went over some of the dangers and pitfalls of the grocery store and even some bakeries. But if you Google sourdough cookies, you know, somebody listening to sourdough pasta, sourdough, whatever, 99% of the recipes that pop up are going to have taken, you know, the blog post or the person making the recipe has taken a regular chocolate chip cookie recipe, slapped in a little bit of sourdough mother, and then called it a sourdough cookie.
Right.
The problem is, if that's the case, and so most of these recipes are like this. Okay, here you can take this, and you add the flour and add the mother and mix everything up, and then make it into cookies and put it in the oven. There's no fermentation. Like you've put a whole bunch of raw flour in there that has never gone through that fermentation step. So you can call it sourdough and probably make the argument that it might taste a little better because of that mother that's gone into it, but it's no healthier than a regular sourdough cookie. So that's one of the things that we've been developing a lot here is, okay, how do we introduce mother into this recipe and then allow it to fully ferment so that the final product, all the flour in it, has gone through that process.
Right. And we love that. We love everything that like that. And I think about, if anybody doesn't know, we just got back from Virginia. What was that? A couple months ago. And Bill and Christina are the ones who fed everybody. I gave a talk there, and there were several people there, and Bill and Christine fed everybody there.
They're
And
tacos.
we've told so many people about this. You know how everything is just like you said. Everything was fermented, and everything tasted absolutely fantastic. And we had a Mexican meal. You were talking about how you fermented the beans to make the refried beans. You fermented the tomatoes, everything to make the salsa. I liked when you stood up in front of everybody and you had a big ball of cheese and explained if you're lactose intolerant or anything like that, you're not going to have to worry about this cheese. If you have celiac disease or if you have gluten insensitivity, you're not going to have to worry about your taco shells. And just explaining why all these sensitivities are coming up is because of the type of food that we eat right now. And when you actually eat it healthy, you don't have to worry about that. And that was amazing to me. I mean, we are your rock stars. I mean, we just love you guys. You know, we've listened to you speak. We've read your book. We watched your series. I mean, we just think you're awesome.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really neat. That's the first time I really thought about that. It's like, oh, they're actually eating all the carbs, the sugar, and everything out of that. That's what the fermentation was really doing, and it made us want to come home and start doing all these things. Like she said, you know, we started with the yogurt because the yogurt was easy. You know, according to my beautiful wife. I haven't made it, and then I'd be like Christina, like, whoa! Before you leave, what the heck do you do here? and so sourdough is definitely going to be our next one.
Yeah.
So, and thank you guys for making this. But real quick,
You're
I
very
know,
welcome.
I know we've gone long, and this is totally up to you because I want to respect your time, and we definitely would love to have you on again. But we didn't touch on anything. We didn't talk a whole lot about all your book. We didn't talk anything about your series, which I absolutely love. So I want to mention it, and then it's your time how much you want to talk about it or if there's anything else. But just like we said, Bill Schindler has a series called The Great Human Race, and it's on Prime. And we watch no what's called
Reality.
We watch no reality TV. We don't watch any of that stuff. But after watching that, and then we started watching Alone and then Naked and Afraid, and we haven't watched Survivor or anything. But even with them, it's really, really amazing. So many different things. My mind just swirled. So many different things about this is what's cool about yours versus theirs is you teach. You actually explain when you make things like what is called the addle.
Mm-hmm.
So when you make
That's my favorite episode. I told you that.
You did.
it is. I love that, and the fact that you actually what was the animal? I was trying to tell somebody last night.
It was a wild boar. It was a Russian boar, I think.
It was a wild. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. See, it was a while back that we saw it, but I remember I was trying to tell them how it was. But you don't just. In fact, I'll let you, depending on your time, I'll let you guys talk about that show and what happened and everything. But you guys have got to watch this. It is amazing, and I'll let you guys go. You tell them.
You want to talk about it?
You go for
All
it.
right. So, thank you very much for giving us
give
an
you the
opportunity
wife
to talk about it.
perspective later.
She can give the wife perspective on it. We filmed that show. We filmed it 8 years ago. Billy turned 10, and it aired 7 years ago now. It was at a time when all these reality survival TV shows were like, hitting hard. Everybody was watching them, and except for you guys, I guess.
You weren't.
And it was the TV networks were getting super silly. Like everybody was looking for the next, like, what's the next thing the hook that's going to get everybody to watch our survival TV show? And it got silly. Like, they were putting naked people together in the woods. Mm-hmm. They were taking people and pretending they just escaped from prison and like shackling their legs together. They had to go survive. I mean, it was getting silly. Wow. But National Geographic said, no. Let's, and this is why I loved it so much. Let's take this survival TV genre like wave.
Here,
That's the
that's
show.
his show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's on DVD. Not that anybody has a DVD player anymore, but you can go to DVD.
So, and they said, let's use this survival TV genre and, use it as an opportunity to tell a story of our shared ancestral past. And there was a lot of discussion about how they had a great idea, and then it took months to figure out how we were actually going to implement it. But they took two of us, me and my co-star, and we started at 2.5 million years ago in Tanzania. At the time, we thought the scientific community, the archaeological community, thought that was the earliest example of any stone tools in the world. It turns out, and literally right before the show aired, we found out that it predates actually about 1 million years, almost 3.5 million years ago.
Oh, man.
So, but we started at that moment when there was, at the time, we thought there was the first creation of a technology that allowed our ancestors to do something. And it was a big deal. And then over the next 10 episodes, each one represented a particular time that something happened built around some sort of technology or technological advancement in the place that it took place. And we started 2.5 million years ago in Tanzania, went through Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and ended in Oregon at 4,000 years ago. And in each of these locations, I replicated the technologies from that time period, and then we had to survive using only those technologies. And I'll tell you, the film crew is amazing. And they've been on, most of that film crew has been on every episode of Survivor filming, and, they've been on all the other. They said that they were really proud, and it makes me really proud, that this was the most authentic show they ever worked on. And no matter what, for anybody watching it, no matter what it depicts, because a lot of things happen when they cut stuff, and just to help story flow and make it actually make sense, no matter how many days it represents on the TV for the episode, we were out there for about 10 days at a time in each episode. That's how long we were actually living using those technologies.
And then how long are between episodes?
Each episode, so we would leave, there's 10 episodes. I left 5 times, right? And each episode, and so we'd film 2 episodes at a time. and it took 5 weeks usually to film each episode. That it involves, traveling, getting on the ground, getting all set up. What I loved is we got to live with and learn from, in almost all cases, some indigenous group. Like in the first episode, we were living with the Hadza for about a week, and they were like, this is where the black mamba lives, and don't touch this plant, it'll kill you, and that sort of thing, just to help us navigate what we're about to get into. And then we would film for 10 days solid, and then we'd have a day or 2 days off as we travel to the next place, film that, and then came home for 2 weeks. But being home wasn't a break, right? No, I mean,
because he made all his clothes. So I mean, literally everything you see he made. So all the tools, I mean, you made them on camera because that was all authentic on camera, but all his clothes he made sitting in front pretty much of our TV. I'll never forget. It was right before the last time he was going out for the last two filming. And what was you were making?
We were headed to film the Mongolia, Siberia episode, and it was the big reindeer.
It was reindeer. So as a treat for the kids, because he hadn't been home, there was a new what are those like indoor water parks? I can't think of the name of it right now, but it was a brand new one that just opened, and I swear we were like the second people to ever stay in this room. But he also had to sew at night what we were
sewing with animal sinew.
Oh my God. And when we left, it looked like we had like golden retrievers in there with us because
there
was hair everywhere. And of course it was like no animals, you're going to get fined and all that stuff. I was like, how do I explain that my husband's sewing a reindeer outfit to be on a TV show on Nat Geo? So thank God we were okay. We were using like duct tape everywhere, like to pick it up through the hotel room. It was 100% authentic.
Where'd the reindeer come from?
Some of the deer skin I brain tanned myself that I made the clothes out of. A lot of the deer skin, there was a guy in Kentucky that brain tanned it. The reindeer skin, I couldn't. So one of the things that I thought this was a great opportunity for me to also learn. I mean, all the technologies that I represented in the show, I had done a bunch, before. Was teaching then at Washington College, and I was doing on my own. But I never had to survive using them. So, having to survive and rely on these technologies is a completely different thing than sitting in a lecture hall, banging on rocks and then showing somebody and putting it away. But I also felt the clothes piece was a part I didn't have a lot of experience in. And I wanted to just not experience making, but also just experience. Like, is this really going to protect me from the elements sort of thing? So I wanted to make sure that I made everything authentic. And I spent 400 hours making clothes for that show. And I was taking animal sinew and literally sewing this.
We didn't factor that into the contract.
Yeah, we didn't.
we missed that one.
But the reindeer episode came up so quick. That episode came up so quickly, and we couldn't get brain tanned reindeer skin, caribou skin. So it was commercially tanned. It was still caribou skin, but it was commercially tanned. Right. The thing I thought was fascinating though was the footwear. It was all the boots and the shoes, everything I made and used, and I was always worried I'm going to slip. It's going to be whatever. It was brilliant having my feet in that. Certainly there's something about having bare feet on the ground, but some of the cases. I mean, we were in 40-degree below zero weather in northern Mongolia. It was impossible. But what we made worked. It was awesome. So,
see, and just real quick, what? Because the difference with the great human race is that's neat because it's the same two people, you and Kat, and you're in one environment, and then on the next series or a couple episodes later, then you're in a totally different environment. So, what all different environments did you go? We know you were in the desert, you were in the Arctic, you were in the jungle.
So it was Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, Oman, Turkey, Republic of Georgia, Mongolia, Siberia, Northern Mongolia, Alaska, and then Oregon. If that's 10, that was it. And again, it was hard. Listen, Nat Geo did a brilliant job of using 10 episodes to depict this incredibly complicated, diverse story. But the different time periods are like 2.5 million years ago, 2 million years ago, 200,000 years ago, 70,000 years ago. All of these that was so important. And what I loved was it was visual. I hope it was entertaining. I hope it made sense.
Very.
But the feedback afterwards was, we had, adults like, tell me more. I want to learn more about this. And this is great. But we had kids that were contacting saying, using language like 12-year-old kids, Homo erectus and Homo habilis and all, and stone tools and leva, all these wonderful things. Kids.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. That part of it was very, very wonderful.
But that was
what's that?
Just real quick, the Homo habilis, there's the Homo habilis, because they couldn't have fire, so you guys weren't allowed to have fire, even though you knew how to make fire off of the land of where you weren't allowed to, because the Homo habilis, is it habilis?
Habilis, yep.
Habilis. Homo habilis didn't have it, and I thought that was neat too. Is like, even though there was stuff that you knew you could do, even though you're out there all by yourself, like these other places, you can't, because you're sticking to the time frame of the historical what people could do.
And it was a juggle, because it was a reality TV show. It was unscripted, but at the same time, there were sort of these rules we had to follow differently in each episode. Like in the first episode, pre-fire, we couldn't have fire. And we knew what the toolkit had to be, because we have it archaeologically, right? The toolkit I could replicate had to be this. And the second episode, and also we knew sort of things we were trying to highlight. In the second episode, fire was crucial to the entirety of what we were trying to show in that. And then in the episode you mentioned with the Atlatl, and my favorite episode 6, this is the first complex weapon system in the world, and it's spread around the world. It's spread more diversely than the bow and arrow did, and we knew that it was important to not only make that tool, but to be able to use that tool, right?
Yeah.
So it was a juggle with all of it, but it was awesome, and we learned a ton, and it's the basis for a lot of the stuff that we do now, really.
Well, Steve and I were talking about that. It seemed like that's what you had kind of come up with. It's like, once you did that.
But I have to put a plug in for her, and she'll say it too. She said it before. If you wanted a really entertaining survival show of what the struggle was really like, they should have filmed her after I left. When we were 50-50, I left for 9 months, and she's there with 3 kids, a career, a dog, and a whole bunch of kefir that had to be fermented.
Containers in the fridge that I had no idea what they were. Absolutely, it was something. Yeah, we all learned a lot.
You did.
Yes.
And you stayed married.
And we did. Yes.
Well, here, I know we got to go, but this is really important. The first, though, it was crazy. Like, we're in the middle of nowhere on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, in a kind of a rural area. And the first episode, I leave to go. And remember, we mentally really weren't totally prepared for this, because we didn't know what it entailed. We've never done any TV like stuff before. We had no idea.
He's going off with another woman. Let's be honest about this too. I mean, he's going to survive around the world with some other chick.
This limo pulls up, with this driver, and I get into the car, and I'm off. Like, there's tears. I'm not going to see the family for 5 weeks, and I'm going to middle, Africa with a satellite phone. Like, we very upset. Everybody's upset. And 5 weeks later, I come back, and it's hugs and tears, and we're happy you're home. And then, 2 weeks go by, and then I leave again, and there were still tears, but they were a little less upset than they were the first time. But what was fascinating was when I came back the second time, I realized that, they say, what does it say? A traveler can never return home, because at home things continue and everybody's continuing. Well, she figured out how to make this work. Not a single mom, but single mom, career, kids, all this, had it going. And me coming back threw a wrench into the 5 weeks, 10 weeks at this point, that she figured it all out. And it was really unsettling to me that it was like I was messing stuff up when I came back.
Right.
I was still operating like I had left 5 weeks earlier, and she was a rock star. But anyhow.
Is that part of why she was okay with you when they asked if you wanted to be on Naked and Afraid, and you didn't think that she would let you, but she was like, yeah, you can go.
There's nothing sexual about that show at all.
That was prior to actually doing this show, but yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah. I thought they offered you that after you did the Great Human Race.
No, I was never officially offered the Naked and Afraid thing. I was teaching a primitive technology class at the college when that show was really getting big, and they said you should be on Naked and Afraid. The students wanted me to be on it. And so when I asked her, this is like a couple weeks before Nat Geo reached out about this show. So I went to Christina. I said, hey, what do you think about me being Naked and Afraid? Because I knew she was going to say no. So I didn't have to tell the students I didn't want to do it. She would be the scapegoat. And when she said, "Yeah, that'd be fine," it kind of blew that out. But thankfully, I didn't have to talk to the students about anything because Nat Geo reached out. And
That's really exciting, though.
That is.
And to think where you are now because of that.
Yeah,
right.
And it's a big part of the way we look
It
at the
is.
world.
I mean,
Right.
everything's
Right.
tied together.
Yeah.
Actually, the whole book, Eat Like a Human, pulls it all together because it starts off with your experiences in Mongolia. It pulls in our family travels. There's, information about when we did the blood and the milk. So what I like about the book is it weaves it all together and it makes it approachable. And then all the recipes are in there too. So it's funny. We've had all these people come in to the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. They're like, "You really need a cookbook." And I'm like, have you seen this book here that's on the front called Eat Like a Human? Because a lot of people just think it's the stories of the
Right.
archaeological and anthropology, like the past. But it's like, no, we're an open book. All our recipes are there. So yes, if you want to eat it downstairs, we'll prepare it for you. But if you want to make it at home, the recipes are in the book, and we'll help you along the way.
And you'll tell us where the best place is for us to get the insects that we would use to make our.
Yes.
Absolutely. So that the next time we come together, we'll talk insects.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just real quick, would you mind talking about your experience in Sardinia? Because we know the Blue Zone documentary is out, the second one or whatever it is. I think we've seen it come across on Netflix.
I think there's a couple episodes, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what's Sardinia? Your cheese experience there. Want to hear about that because people can go on your Instagram and definitely see that. But talk about that a little bit and then talk about what the Blue Zone says about them.
And
Right.
and how
Because
people who are promoting blue zones are
plant-based.
totally talking about how it's plant-based and how that's not true. And you guys actually lived with them, so you know.
Yeah, in fact, I got. Why don't you remind me something about Bill and Christina in a second? You want to talk about the cheese first, and then we can dive into Blue Zone
You
stuff.
can go for it.
You sure?
Yeah.
Great, come here.
It's back.
It just happens. I didn't realize we were
What
going
is
to talk about
this?
this.
Oh,
All right.
you never know around here what you might
I
find.
actually put it on my dresser, and I knew I needed to bring it in here.
So he had some bucket list items with going to Sardinia, and we were there with the kids in June or July of this summer. So he wanted to learn about this acorn bread, and it was a way to be able to process the acorns, and it was mixed. That's really attractive, honey. Charcoal item. Primitive man over here, which we were able to do that research. We also did traditional cheese making. Literally, we were animal to cheese.
That we told you a little bit about that earlier.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
The other cheese.
We also had some kasumarzu, which is maggot cheese. That was really we had a lot of very intense flavors, I could say, in Sardinia.
So
Very intense.
this is the actual reason we
Get a
went to
little closer to
Sardinia.
the thing for 'em.
Oh, there you go. This is the actual reason we went to Sardinia. This particular eggcorn. So Pliny, they have a traditional. It's funny that we went there for a plant-like thing and then realized how heavily they value animals in their diets. But this particular acorn, all acorns are toxic at some level of tannic acid in them. Some of the tannic acid can make you very, very sick if you ingest a bunch of it. Acorns turn out to be a food staple prehistorically in a lot of different parts of the world, but they need to be processed. The toxins need to be processed out of the plants. And there's a lot of different ways to process toxins out of plants. What was cool about this particular tradition in Sardinia is, number one, it's old and it's been documented for a long. It's been written about at some level for a long time. So Pliny the Elder writes about this acorn bread that, in order to process it properly and make it safe to eat, they use a combination of wood ash and clay, which is fascinating to me for a couple of different reasons. And I see this in a lot of different groups around the world using either wood ash or clay in their food processing. I learned about this in graduate school. I had read about it in graduate school, and I spent several years trying to figure out somebody I could go learn from. But it turns out everything was a dead end. Like, nobody was doing this anymore. And they're like, yeah, we used to do that, but nobody knows how to do it anymore. It's not done anymore. And I couldn't believe that. I even got in contact with somebody who was the head of the Nordic Food Lab, which was associated with the best restaurant in the world. They do all this amazing stuff around the world. And he's from Sardinia. And he's like, no, nobody does it anymore. So I tabled it for a while. And then finally I picked it back up again a few years ago. And I finally found 3 elderly women that still knew how to make this bread. And it's so important that this was the precursor, they think, to polenta. That polenta, which is now made with corn, was originally made with acorns using this process, and then chestnuts, and then finally now maize or corn. So anyway, we finally found these people, and we got in contact with them, and we were going to go learn from them. But at the same time, I got in contact with this amazing woman, Gisela is her name, Gisela Rubia, and she is a food historian. She's Sardinian and a food historian. She lives in the epicenter in Villa Grande, the epicenter of the first blue zone ever identified. And food historian, she is very proud of her traditions, and she was able to connect with us and offered for us to come be with her and a bunch of shepherds in the area and eat with them and share food and cook and all this wonderful stuff. So we knew we were going to go make that cheese we talked about earlier. We knew we were going to work with shepherds. We knew we were going to do this eggcorn bread. But what the reality of what happened when we actually got there was mind blowing. So first off, for anybody who's heard about the blue zones or started to think about it, this place is the real deal. Like they're not inflating the numbers of how old people live and how amazing the centenarians. And this particular village still holds the record for the largest amount of males that live over 100 years old, which is a big deal.
We saw so many walking up the hills. I mean, it was unbelievable. Just the health and vitality of these people.
And with things that were, I think, really stuck out to us a lot was we saw no gyms. Like, this is a village on the side of a mountain. Now, it's not a little tiny village with like 3 huts. I mean, this is a proper town/city on the side of a village, on the side of a mountain. No, we saw no gyms. There's no gyms. And there's also no nursing homes. Mm-hmm. So, and it isn't the fact that these people aren't moving. They're moving all the time. They walk. And there were cars everywhere, but they walk. We took the ride to get there was probably one of the curviest. Everybody was hours in the car in Sardinia. And we finally got out of the car, was ready to throw up and just maybe go lay down because it was like this the whole time. And as soon as we got out of the car, like, hey, let's go for a walk. Hours. They walk all the time.
But that was so interesting because I feel like in America, if somebody comes to your house for the first time, you're going to probably sit down around that's what we would typically do. Kitchen table, have a glass of wine, coffee, depending on what time of day it is, and sit down and chat. That wasn't even a thought.
The chatting was, but as we walked.
Well, we walked. And they walked fast. So,
and it's not flat. I mean, it's like this.
Yeah.
So they're walking all the time. We asked them about, what's this secret? Like, everybody's living through it. What's the secret? And one of the things they said was, we're nice. Like, they're just nice. They're truly, now I'm sure there's conflict. I'm sure there's all sorts of things, but everybody's just nice. And they visit one another and communicate with one another. And
take care of each other.
They take care of each other. There's no nursing homes because the multi-generations in the same homes, just like it's been for a very long time. So there's a lot of that. But as far as food's concerned, the suggestion that they eat a plant-based diet is completely false. I mean, it is so remotely wrong, you wouldn't believe.
We didn't see many vegetables.
To
our daughter's dismay, there was not many vegetables. A lot of organ meat.
I mean, you did saw tomatoes. What do we have? Tomatoes, like eggplant one night, a lot of garlic. There's some onions.
They did that potato fried thing.
There were some potatoes, but it wasn't the staple part. It wasn't the main part of the meal.
We had salad once.
We had one salad.
We never saw minestrone.
Yeah.
So the whole talk about
soup thing on the blues is silly.
And they laughed about it.
There's no minestrone. What are you talking about, minestrone?
Yeah.
Animals they just said that. They just made that up in the book. Blue Zones.
They probably
something,
but the way they've exasperated it is actually a joke in the Blue Zones. But what was beautiful was it also wasn't, I'm going to go buy a bunch of T-bone steaks. It was the whole animal, regularly. I mean, they celebrated the entirety of the animal. Again, they were connected to it. It was ethical and sustainable, but it was nourishing. And they felt that, I think, that responsibility to, they harvest something, they're going to use it all. But the other thing that's cool is, one thing we pride ourselves on is that if you came to our house, our table to sit down to eat, or you come to a restaurant, sit down to eat, there's no links in the food chain, like 1 or 2 links. That's it. We've made it all completely in-house. And I know we're not the only people in the world that do that, but that's kind of a rarer thing. It's becoming much more rare in the modern Western world. Every single meal that we ate in somebody's home, everything on that table, at most, there was 1 link in the food chain between us. And in most cases, everything on that, the olive oil, the olives, the pigs, all of it, they raised, harvested, and prepared themselves. Everybody there is making their own cheese. Everybody there is raising pigs. Everybody there has their own orchards. Everybody there has their own gardens. Actually, it's built into the community and where people are. It's all figured out beautifully. They don't have any. One of the things that I said on a podcast recently is they don't hire any nutrition. The oldest living health. Some people would believe the healthiest people in the world don't have to hire nutritionists because they don't have any questions about their food. They know where it comes from, the best way to prepare it. It's all very traditional. It was awesome.
See, and that's what you also said. I don't remember how you worded it, but basically, we're the only species that has to ask somebody else what we should be eating. It's like all other species, they know exactly what they eat, and that's what they eat. Now, all of a sudden, the humans we're all confused on this because we're being told one thing from the food manufacturers, and then we're told something else from the people who are actually healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a modern thing. Modern day Homo sapiens have been on this planet for 300,000 years. Us having to ask somebody what we should be eating hasn't been going on for 300,000 years. It's been going on for like 150 at most, if not 100 years. So we have to actually start asking somebody what we should be eating. They don't have to ask. In fact, we went there obviously to learn from them, and we learned a ton.
Wow, that is so cool.
That is so awesome. I really would love to have you guys back sometime. We've gone an hour and a half. This is the longest podcast we've ever had, but we love you guys so much. We seriously do. And there's so much that we haven't even touched on our little list.
Yeah. So, but go ahead and wrap it up. Tell everybody how they can find you. Explain your classes that you offer, because you can also go to Maryland, Chestertown.
You can come visit us.
And do your classes.
And
so explain all that.
So we're located in Chestertown, Maryland, which is on the eastern shore of Maryland. So it's right next to Delaware. It's a really nice spot because we're about an hour and 15 outside of Philly and of DC. So depending on where you want to fly into and see us, and we're about an hour and a half to the beach. So we have a lot of people who fly in for our classes, and then they'll take a little road trip out of it and be able to see some other places on the East Coast. So a couple ways that you can learn with us at the Eastern Shore Food Lab. Our website for the nonprofit is eatlikeahuman.com, and on there we put all our classes. So there's on-demand ones. So you got inspired and you want to go make yogurt right now, pop on and get the fermented dairy class, and you could be making yogurt tonight for your family, or the sourdough class, and you'll have sourdough bread and about 5 days after you get your mother going. But you can get all those things, right now immediately. But we also do in-person classes, and we're going to be doing more classes virtually, but live too for people. We've been getting a lot of requests for that. And what's important is kind of growing the community, because as you know, like-minded people, the beauty of social media we have found is that it really unites people that way. Unfortunately, there's a lot of division with social media, but one thing that we really try to stress is how we can unite, and the people that we've met around the world through social media has been great. So you can always connect with us on there. You're at Dr. Bill Schindler.
Yeah, for Instagram.
For Instagram, and then the Modern Stone Age Kitchen is at Modern Stone Age Kitchen. We also ship, and you can come out here. That's what we like about our classes, because you can take the class and then we'll feed you. So you're nourished all the way,
mind and body.
Mind and body. And of course, you can get Bill's book. If you want an autographed copy, you can order that off the Eat Like a Human website, and we'll ship you out an autographed copy, or one of our fancy T-shirts here that everybody's wearing.
Oh, I am. I love it. In fact, I just got mine in the mail.
Like yesterday.
Like yesterday. It was like, what took so long? I said, I'm waiting for this.
We just had a new printing because they went too fast. So
that's
sorry.
why.
We were waiting on a new round of.
Yeah. So what's in the future? Like, what are you working on? Anything? Just
a lot.
Classes?
We're working. Actually, one thing that's cool is we've realized the value in what we're working towards. And we've been able to make an impact, certainly, but we want to make the biggest impact possible. We're actually in the middle of a intensive 5-year strategic plan for the nonprofit, which will wrap up in a few months. So you can look for us switching up a few things and improving the way we're doing things to make as big of an impact as possible.
So one thing we do is we do send an email out to our community every Monday, and that's got all the podcasts and blog posts and all those kind of good things on it. So that's been a great way to be able to build our community, and the strategic plan has reinforced that people really enjoy getting content from us in that format. And then the other thing that they also have shared is that they would like us to do a podcast. So that looks like just like you two.
Yeah. So we'll ask a bunch of questions soon.
Good, dude.
Husband and wife podcast, yin and yang type thing too, coming down the road.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And then we just expanded here at the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. So So we just signed a lease on a commercial kitchen right behind us. So that's going to become our modern Stone Age market moving forward. So we're going to move all our grab and go items to the market so that we have more of a sit down kind of restaurant feel, even though we said we'll never own a restaurant. We're embracing it now. We own a restaurant.
It's a foodery.
It's a foodery.
Thank you.
Exactly. It'll always be a foodery.
And we'll have a full butcher and deli in-house, everything made in-house, deli shop as well. So you can get whatever you need there and bring it home and cook it, or come here and eat, sit down meal.
Because what we're seeing right now is we've hit capacity that we can't produce enough food to be able to feed the community that wants to take it home. So like scrapple's a great example, or our liverwurst.
Or bacon.
Who would have known? Yeah. People want that in the fridge because they want to be able to take it home and have it with their family during the week. Right. So we're hoping with the additional kitchen space that we'll be able to increase our production and then be able to put that into our regions for people to take home.
So when you said you ship, do you mean you ship food or?
We do. So right now we only ship our non-refrigerated and non-frozen items because, to be honest, I haven't figured out dry ice yet, and I just haven't. There's only so many in a day. Yeah. So we do ship all our sourdough products. Actually, I got some orders down there to ship right now. And the thing is, when people buy our things, like right now I have to ship 8 loaves of sourdough to one person and 5 loaves of sandwich bread, because when people get it and they realize that their body responds to it positively and this is food that they can eat, they'll buy it in bulk and then freeze it, because all our products freeze really, really well.
Yeah.
The only thing we can't ship legally and we will not be able to do for some time unfortunately is any animal products, because
like your scrapple.
The scrapple, the bacon, all that,
right?
Even the pork rinds, because the USDA regulations for interstate commerce is well above anywhere where we're at the moment. But we'll get there. But the other cool thing is, real quick, we do realize the value of on the ground, in person teaching and learning, immersive sort of things. And we launched our first one this year. It was awesome, and we're going to launch a whole bunch more. But we're doing trips. Right, so we did a trip to Ireland a few months ago. It was
August,
awesome, and it was a week long, and it was just nourishing food and archaeology and anthropology and foraging and cooking together and eating. It was awesome. We're working on one to Kenya. We're working on one to Oaxaca, and we're working on one that will probably focus around Sardinia, but it might be Sardinia, Sicily,
So essentially where we've gone as a family to be able to do food research, we want to be able to bring back like-minded people to be able to share those experiences.
Because
I love that.
They're awesome.
Yeah, 100%. We will be there. We are going to do one of these trips with you, and we are going to go see your Modern Stone Age. I keep wanting to say Modern Stone Age family. Did you get that from the Flintstones?
Yeah, we did it. But that is technically our LLC. It's the Modern Stone Age Family LLC, doing business as the Modern Stone Age Kitchen and Modern Stone Age Market. And then we have this little storage building between us that we wrote a grant for, in between the market and the kitchen, and we call that the cave. It's the cave. Yeah.
You sense a theme, right?
Yes,
there's a theme here.
That's right.
I love it.
That's wonderful. And once again, the name of his series on Amazon is called The Great Human Race. Watch this, and you're going to find when people are out here in the wilderness, they are not searching for a bunch of carbohydrates to live off of. They are looking for meat, organs, nose to tail, and fat. I mean, it's all so healthy. And what's so cool about what Bill does is, like I said, he explains when he makes a tool, he explains exactly why he's making it, what they use, when this tool was actually produced throughout history. And then he goes out and uses it to actually kill his own food for that episode. It just, I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I'm not just blowing smoke. We're amazed by you guys. We really are. And we do want you back sometime.
Well, we'd love to be back, and you're welcome out here anytime. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you taking the time, and a lot of time.
Yeah, really. But thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. And for all our listeners, thank you so much also for listening, and have a great week. And remember, make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life.